her to do the intro.
Yeah. And so Channel 12 came out. That was cool. Thank you for sending that. And that was just, they heard about you and they just said, hey, we're just going to come out and do this.
Well, more and more when there's stories going down about trafficking.
It's a good story overall. So I'll let you know how it goes. I'm hoping to pitch it to them this way. But if nothing else, we've got the audio.
Right.
Some estimate there are more modern-day slaves or human trafficking victims alive today than during the Atlantic slave trade. One woman right here in Palm Beach County wants every survivor to have a place to call home and to heal.
So this is an ampersand, and it means life isn't over yet. It's going to have a blood-soaked, pain. And there's a woman that was doing the art classes with him that said, wow, there's so much emotion in that. You can definitely, okay? All right. And then this whole side, is it better for her to be on the other side or on the same side with me? She and this guy were hanging out together. Somebody says, hey, we're having a party. I can make it work for your good. I can make it so it's life-giving to those around you. And it's... And now we're going to have a conversation all about the house. I'm going to lean back out of the sun.
Well, Becky Diamond, you are the founder and president of Hephzibah House, and this is your initiative to help with the issue that we hear all across the country, but even right here in South Florida, and that's of human trafficking. Can you tell me how and what led you to start this organization?
I was minding my own business. I had homeschooled our kids, and our youngest daughter was in her last year of high school, and I felt like the Lord spoke to me to go back to school to get my master's in counseling psychology. I thought he was kidding. And about 6 months later, I heard him say, why haven't you taken the GRE? And I went, oh, you're serious? And so I enrolled in Palm Beach Atlantic, which is a local Christian university, because I thought I would get along better with them than the secular professors at State University. And they didn't require any minimum for the GRE, so I said, well, if you don't care what the score is, I don't either. So I signed up and took it the next week. And so I was just going to back, it wasn't a dream, it wasn't anything that I had, honestly, probably didn't think I was worth the investment. And about halfway through, I was just going out of obedience, and about halfway through, I heard a man who was from International House of Prayer in Kansas City, Derek Laux, talk about human trafficking in the United States. And I was wrecked. I was in the back. I was, tears and I was wrecked. And I went, oh my goodness, this is why the Lord told me to go back to school. Somehow, someday, some way, this is the population I'm going to work with.
And what was it about what he said about this issue that just grabbed your heart?
I thought slavery ended in the 1800s. I could not have been more wrong. And the idea that there was slavery at all, much less in the United States, that's not right. That's so not right. I don't speak foreign languages, so I figured as a counselor, as a mental health counselor, you need to be really fluent in the language, wherever you are. So it was obvious that I, probably needed to speak with English-speaking, people. And so I started looking for someone in Palm Beach County that was addressing, that was providing services for survivors, and there was no one specifically addressing that need. The closest was in Miami, and my husband goes, no, read my lips, you are not driving to Miami every day. And so I finished school and started to, work on getting my licensure. I was, doing my internships, and felt like the Lord started to direct me to go ahead and start providing mental health counseling. So we did that. We started back in 2011, our first clients, and we began providing mental health counseling, life and job skill training, career counseling, group therapy, with women that had already, some type of living situation, not in the life. And then about, I think it was November 2015, we opened the Safe House. And so that's been a really critical part, because 92% of women in the life would leave if they had a better option. And so often, they don't have any other options, or they can't imagine any other options. And so having a safe house is really a critical piece of helping women to be able to escape that and to rebuild their lives, begin to address the trauma.
Well, you talked about you didn't even realize that slavery still existed today. So many people don't. Tell us a little bit about the numbers, the impact of this issue worldwide and right here in South Florida.
Well, they estimate somewhere around 35, 38 million slaves in the world today. Wow. Exponentially more than what was back in the 1800s, even if you pull all the years together. And in South Florida, we started to do research. People kept asking, what is it like here? And I went, well, I don't really know. But they estimate that it's half and half sex trafficking and labor trafficking. So I started to do research on sex trafficking. And so just looking at the numbers that I could verify, okay, so that's erotic massage parlors, escort services, and strip clubs. Just looking at those numbers, we figure someplace between 2,000 and 2,500 in Palm Beach County. Now, that's not counting brothels. It's not counting porn production. It's not counting women on the street or Backpage, because they don't put that on their income taxes. So it's hard. So I would think that 2,500 is maybe half of what is actually happening, if I was just going to guess. And then if you're going to add in labor trafficking, that probably means close to 10,000 people total being trafficked in this county. If you live in this county, you probably live within 10 miles of a modern-day slave. And the other thing to remember, some people go, well, it's their choice, it's a job, it's a career. But statistically, there's a research article that talked about 90% of the women being commercially sexually exploited are controlled by trafficker, gang, or mafia, which means they don't keep the money that they make. Right? And many women will come and self-identify as a prostitute. I was a prostitute, right? My job's not to argue with them. So I'll come back a few weeks later and I'll go, okay, so whose idea was that? Was that your idea? No, it wasn't my idea, All right. What if you'd said, I'm terrible at this job. Can I get a job at Target? No, they wanted me to make, the money. What if you'd said, look, my mom is sick. I got to go, I need to go help her. No, I tried to leave. I got beat. I got, whatever. Okay. I said, well, did you make money? Oh yeah, I made a ton of money. Awesome. How much of that did you get to keep? None of it. And so I come back and I say, I submit to you that you were not a prostitute. You were trafficked. I have yet, and I've worked with 50-something women at this point, I have yet to meet anyone that it was their idea, they liked doing it, they could leave if they wanted to, and they got to keep the money. Zero. Zero. And the huge majority, I think 2 of the women that I've worked with, did not have some kind of profound early family of origin trauma, abuse, molestation. And that, that just really sets people up for being trafficked. It violates boundaries, it takes your voice, it really puts you at a disadvantage to be able to go, no, I'm not doing that, and if that's where you're rolling, I'm not going with you, kind of a thing.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in just the few years that you've been doing this, how many women have you seen come through Hephzibah House?
I've worked with almost 50 women since 2011, a number of them providing just mental health counseling services. I think we've had 8 women in the house now. So, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what you do and how you are helping these women process their lives. Some obviously come for counseling. Others come and stay right in this home and go through a program. Tell us a little bit about those options that you offer these women leaving this lifestyle.
We provide mental health counseling, trauma therapy. So we use a number of different interventions for that. I do a lot of inner healing. The Bible says that Jesus came to heal the brokenhearted. The Hebrew word is shabar. It means shattered. Wow. He came to heal people whose hearts were shattered by life's experiences. And I personally have had God show up in session and touch someone and in 10 minutes accomplish more than we could have done in 10 months of standard therapy. So if I can, create the opportunity for the Lord to come in, right? He makes me look really good. People are healed. There was one woman who suffered torture as a child. She was being shock treatment, and she was having nightmares, like 4 and 5, 8 nightmares, the same dream all night. And so she had called me, because I give them my cell phone number, so she's calling me in the middle of the night, right? And the third night she calls me and she goes, I finally remembered to look for Jesus. And she said he wasn't on the edge, arms crossed, aloof. She said he was so intent on supporting me that he was being shocked with me. Game changer. Game changer. That, oh my goodness, he cares so much that he went through the torture with me so I wouldn't have to go alone. That is a game changer in terms of trust, because so many of them have no idea how to trust. Everybody that coulda, shoulda, woulda was abusive, manipulative, coercive, right? And so the biggest deal is winning trust. So for the Lord to show up and do that, blew some doors off in a good way.
Well, I'm sure it's stories like that that really make it worthwhile, or just really helps you to realize what you're doing this for. Share with me a story of one woman. And again, I know obviously you don't have to give their name, but share with me a story of one woman, her before and after picture coming through Hephzibah House.
Well, I'm trying to figure out who I want to talk about. Well, let me talk about the woman that suffered such terrible torture as a child. When she first came, it took about 6 months, 8 months before she would give me access, because she was so accustomed even to Christians being coercive, manipulative, and in some level abusive. And so I just, you just keep creating the opportunity, you keep creating safety, you keep creating choices, so we could do this or that, let them pick, so I'm not pushing you, right? And when she finally began to allow me access, it was just profound, because she would say that I was the first person in her entire life, okay, she was in her 30s at the time, first person that she'd ever trusted, ever given that kind of access to in her entire life. Most women who've been trafficked have never had a redemptive relationship with another woman, right? And I learned how to do relationship in same-sex relationships that are not sexual. They're just, I'm not trying to take advantage of you, I'm not trying to get anything from you, I'm just doing my best to love like Jesus loved. And that has created safety that she doesn't even hardly have words for. It's interesting, when I was asked to be the keynote speaker for the Victims' Rights Week this last spring, and so I talked to the women in the house and I said, okay, so I've been a victim, but not anything like y'all have. What can I say that can add to the dialogue, that can be, significant? And the one gal said immediately, to be believed is a gift, because she had worked with therapists before, worked with counselors before, and they didn't believe her. And so as we began to talk about it, it's wow. So they tell me their stories and I believe them. It validates them, it gives them dignity, and it helps them believe that I am safe, right? And as they build that relationship with me, then they have some inkling of God's love. Because the Bible says, if I can't love people whom I can see, how can I love God whom I can't see? So my capacity to trust horizontally really defines my capacity to trust God, right? And so when when Hepzibah House as a community, and it's more than just me, because it really does take a village, right? And so as the community is safe and valuing and honoring, it is the jumping off place for them to go, God, are you really like that? You really love me? You're not mad? You're not ashamed of me? You're not irritated or disappointed or frustrated or annoyed with me? That's just not at all how most people imagine God. Yeah.
Well, I know that one of the things that you're going to show us in a little bit is some of the artwork that some of the women have come through here have created. And it just shows how when you are in a safe place, you're able to process life's challenges. Share a little bit about that. How does coming here to Hepzibah House help these women heal in ways that they wouldn't be able to outside of a safe place like this?
Well, there's something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And so at the bottom is safety and food and shelter and clothing, right? And then there's, the emotional, health, maturity, that kind of thing. And so by having a safe place, we're not worrying about food, they're not worrying about, I have to go to work, they're not worrying about, somebody chasing them down. I mean, we have locks on the gate, we have cameras, we have, security is a big deal, right? And so if I can meet those natural needs, then it frees up energy, impetus, motivation to be able to work on the trauma. Because I can't deal with trauma as long as I'm in danger. In fact, the three most common issues for a woman coming out of sex trafficking are anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Anxiety and depression will remit spontaneously, which means I don't have to do anything, within 6 to 8 weeks of safety, right? But trauma very rarely remits without some type of external intervention. And so by providing the basic needs, it frees up energy and the capacity, the ability to trust, right? The Bible says, I learned to trust at my mother's breast. So we were supposed to learn to trust in this, preeminently nurturing, life-giving, safe, honoring environment. And so in some sense, this whole safe house provides some type of reparenting. It's another opportunity. There's a woman that is probably going to come into the house this week that I guess she was, molested by a family member and reported it, and that person went to prison, and her family's never forgiven her for ruining that person's life. It's like, oh. It just makes my head hurt,
And the situations just like that, if we don't come into contact, I think, with women who have suffered these type of abuses and trauma, we may not truly understand what it is that they have gone through or what a modern day slave or a human trafficking victim has gone through. So paint that picture. Help us understand when these women come to you, what they've gone through, where they are, and what your first steps are with them.
Wow. When they first come, they are, on an anxiety chart that's a 1 to 10, they're about a 15. For one, they can't believe. I don't know how many women have said, why do you even care? They can't wrap their heads around someone caring without wanting something in return. So the first steps are really creating safety. And that takes the P word, that takes patience, patience, right? Because you just can't rush that. As much as I can go, oh, if you would let me in, I could help you. I can't help you until you let me in. Mm-hmm. And so there was one woman, I love this gal. Probably the first 6 months, she would come into my office and she would talk. I mean, it was like a blue streak. You could not get a word in edgewise. So every now and then I'd redirect and I'd redirect. And I think it was 6 months, maybe 8 months before she finally came in one day and go, okay, what are we working on today? And I'm like, oh, well.
I get to talk.
because safety is foreign. You know, the other thing is that for many of them, safety really is foreign. And they, you know, we've had 2 women that came and stayed a week, and it was so foreign to them that they fled, because you might as well drop me in the middle of Romania, you know. You know, that's so weird. Like, one woman said she had moved in with a family that was letting her live with them while they opened a shoe store, and she was going to work with them. And she said it was the weirdest thing I'd ever been in. There was no drugs, there was no alcohol, there was no domestic violence, there was no fighting. She goes, I brought home a pair of pants that needed to be hemmed, and the mom offered to help me hem them. And I'm like, you know, like,
Yeah.
you know, it was so foreign to her. And so, you know, the first thing is to build trust, and that can't be rushed. I think the other thing that's really critical is a safe community, okay? If all the intervention I have is with a therapist, but everybody else around me says that I am a loser, I am, you know, I have no self-worth, no value, my needs aren't important, right? Then that one therapist, you know, that 1 or 1.5 or 2 hours a week is not going to do it. So I think the other thing that's really critical is this amazing community. And the community is made up of other survivors that, I get it, I got you, I got your back, I'm good, right? And so I have seen other survivors be so profoundly life-giving. It's just an amazing community. And then there's amazing volunteers that we have a 4-hour training. If you're going to work with the girls, you're going to have to go through this training. And it's all kinds of information, it's all kinds of insight on how to work with, you know, highly traumatized populations. We're talking about, you know, strength-based work, we're talking about stages of change, we're talking about, I forget some of the other ones. Of course, when you put me on the spot, I can't think of it. But anyway, it's training that kind of helps people learn how to be sensitive in that way. You know, don't ask questions, let them talk. You know, be open-minded. Don't be surprised if they're struggling, you know, in an area that you're going, really, you know, don't be surprised if there's some things about their old life that they miss, you know. And so we have these amazing volunteers that are super life-giving, that have just been, it's an amazing community. We call it the League of Dangerous Women. You know, there's this just amazing life-giving community that begins to speak life, you know, while we're doing therapeutic work, which is critical and important, but the community contribution is every bit as important, because I need to hear from a number of different sources that I'm okay, it's going to be all right, I can make progress, my past does not have to define my future, that God is able to make everything, that kind of pretty much means everything, work together for my good, right? So that means major train wrecks. I don't need help with fingernails, broken fingernails, you know. I can deal with that. So if making everything work together for my good doesn't include the epic fails, what's the point? That's where I really need it to work, is for the big ticket items. And so often community coupled with therapy is a huge part of that healing process.
Wow. Well, take us a little bit into the life, or the day in the life of someone who is going through this program. What are some of the aspects of just everyday living? What does that look like at Hephzibah House?
Well, you know, lights out at 10, and we usually don't have them get up until 8, because a lot of times they're just physically, emotionally, spiritually depleted. And then there's breakfast, there's devotionals, and then we started a social enterprise called Zeba Treats. It's the last 2 syllables of Hephzibah House. And it's animal treats, because so much of life requires job skills, life skills, how to work on a team, how to be appropriate, you know, in that kind of a setting. It's hard to teach money management if it's all theory. So that way we pay them so that they have money to manage. So I can teach them money management skills. I can teach them other skills, like what do you want to learn how to be a bookkeeper? Do you want to learn how to do websites? Do you want to learn how to, you know, do marketing? right? Whatever areas they're interested in, I can provide, you know, I'll find someone that'll train them to do those things so that they have marketable skills when they leave. They have a resume, they have, you know, someone who can write them a letter of recommendation. It provides structure, it provides dignity, because they're not just getting handouts, they're actually, you know, contributing to something bigger than they are. And so that's been super helpful. There's people that come in and do, you know, book studies, and we have a gal that comes and does art with them once a week. We have a small group that they attend, you know, it's not a church, but it's a small faith, you know, based group, so that there's, I found a lot of them are really anxious about going to church because it's big and it's a lot of people, and that's a little freaky for them. So the small group, you know, has worked out much better in terms of, you know, spiritual input. They do a lot of YouTube teachings and that kind of stuff for the daily devotionals. I am not necessarily involved in those, but they journal it, and I check their journals, and, you know, we talk about that kind of stuff. Yeah, all kinds of, you know, people come over and do fingernails and bring pizza and a movie or whatever. So all kinds of ways that volunteers are involved.
Well, what for you, is there a next step for Hephzibah House, or is it more of the same, looking to help more and more women? And so tell us about what's next for Hephzibah House.
Well, when we first started, my dream is to get a horse farm. Okay, so I mentioned trust is really hard. And so a lot of times working with animals can fast track that process. And so I would love to get a horse farm. I would love to build a home. This is tiny. This is like 1,100 square feet. And my office is part of that, right? So that's not much square footage to have some really traumatized people. So I would like a house with 14 beds. And the horse farm would also be an income producer ultimately. There's a gal that is a believer and, you know, has probably 40 years working with horses and is a licensed mental health counselor. And so if I get the horse farm, she's here in a heartbeat. And so we could include equestrian facilitated psychotherapy, which I believe could really be helpful in bridging that gap for trust. There's something about taking care of a 1,500-pound animal that is actually fear-based. Really, what are you afraid of, right? That kind of puts fear in a different perspective. Like, really, this horse is afraid of me? You've got to be kidding. You know, kind of a thing. And so, and to be able to take care of an animal that's helpless. You know, this animal is depending upon your graces for food and water and that kind of thing. So a lot of times it can, you know, facilitate that trust, building trust, which is so critical. And sometimes it takes a long time. And I get it. I don't blame them. I'm not frustrated, but I'm like, okay, so I have 12 to 18 months. That's all the time I have. You know, so let's get rolling as fast as we can. So I think the horses, you know, we would have dogs and, you know, animals and that kind of stuff that would just provide other ways of reaching someone who's so highly traumatized. There was a woman that fled the program last fall, and I thought, you know, if I ever get horses, I might give that gal a call and say, we have, you know, I think horses might make the difference for her.
Well, talk a little bit about that, because this is one of the issues that can be discouraging for so many. You're helping so many women coming out of this lifestyle, but sometimes it doesn't work out quite how you had hoped because of the trauma that they've gone through. Talk about the potential that's there for some of these women to sometimes relapse into their life, and what do you do in situations like that?
The statistics for coming out of sex trafficking are similar to domestic violence. It usually takes 7 times, average of 7 times, before a gal finally leaves and stays out. So much goes into that. And so, you know, our policy is if you leave the program, you have to stay out for at least 3 months. And if we have an open bed, then we'll consider, you know, you coming back into the program. And so it's not a done deal, you know, you're out, you're gone. But it means, you know, people have to want help. I really can't help people who need help. Awful lot of people need help, but you have to want it. And so, you know, this program only works with adults. You know, we don't work with underage minors, and the program has a lot of autonomy. And so, you know, that takes a certain desire on the woman's part to be able to fit into a program like that. And we do drug testing and all that kind of stuff is necessary, you know, because we're creating safety for everyone else in the house, you know, not just for that one person. And so, yeah, when they leave, it's tough. You know, we had one gal that left last fall. I think it was last fall. And she overdosed a couple of months ago, went to her funeral. That's hard. That's hard. You know, you make the resources available. You know, you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink, but you sure can salt their oats. So we try to salt their oats and you know, create an appetite, you know, for healthy living. The volunteers are a big part of that. I know when I came to Christ when I was 20, one of the big reasons I hung out, one of the big reasons that I stayed serving the Lord is I lived with a woman that I knew would come looking for me if I walked. And so that's so often that's the role that the volunteers play to build that relationship, even with people that are really not all that easy to love, right? That will say, hey, what happened? Where are you? I care. You know, that can be really significant.
Well, lastly, give us just a picture of, because you talked a little bit about before and after picture of some of the women that come through Hephzibah House, but if there was one star pupil or star student or someone who was just, you saw the outcome and said, this is what I hope for every woman who walks through the door. What was her, tell us a little bit about that experience and what made that so special.
Well, probably my superstar was actually one of the women that didn't go through early childhood molestation and abuse. So she had a little bit better foundation. It's really hard to go back and rebuild, you know, reparent someone. But this gal was trafficked in college. She was a model, drop dead gorgeous, OMG. She walked in my office, I'm going, yeah, okay, right? And she had gone on a modeling job and they slipped a Mickey in her drink and had her sign paperwork. These were two guys from Miami, and they would put Xanax enough to knock you out, and they would get the women to sign paperwork releasing them for pornographic filming. So she comes to in her dorm room the next day going, wow, I think I remember, I can't believe, nah, you know. And a few weeks later, a friend Facebooks her, messages her and says, hey, I didn't know you did porn. She goes, I don't. And the gal goes, wow, I thought it was you, right? And then she's in a Jamaican restaurant looking at a magazine waiting to be seated, and there's her picture advertising for a film. And she's like, so then she goes, well, all right, I'm not going to do modeling anymore. So she decides to get her bartending license, and you can make more money at a strip club. But you know what? You can make more money than bartending at a strip club if you strip. And so, and then that's like the fishing ground for traffickers. They're looking for new gals, and they're going, wow, you're leaving here at 4 o'clock in the morning with $800 cash. Aren't you worried about that? You know, I can meet you here every morning at 4 o'clock and make sure you make it to your car okay. And you know, if you need a place, you can always crash at my, you know, right? And so it was like 7 years of trafficking and alcohol addiction, not so much other drugs, mostly alcohol, which is kind of a bummer because in the state of Florida, if you use Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drugs, you've already met the minimum bar for force, fraud, or coercion for trafficking. They don't include alcohol, which I've had a number of women that were trafficked through alcohol addictions. But they didn't ask my opinion. I had an opinion, they didn't ask it. Anyway, so she, you know, escaped that trafficker. Another guy picked her up. It was like, wow, right? And it wasn't until this guy sent her to Miami with a controller. There's another woman that was being trafficked, the bottom hoe, the one that's in charge of all the other women. And he sent them to Miami to get their passports. He was going to send them to Dubai. And something in her went, if you leave this country, you will never be back. And she escaped. And then one of the clients at a strip club was actually a decent guy. And she moved in with him. He began to help her, require her to, work on the addictions and that kind of stuff. And then she started coming to me after she'd been clean for, I think she'd been clean for 6 months, before she started coming to see me. Initially, her mom had to drive her. She'd gotten a couple of DUIs. But she's doing really well. She's got a job. She's got a better job offer. She's actually moving out of the area, which makes me sad. But she's really doing well. She wants to go back to school. She has her degree, I think it was in English, or writing, that kind of thing. But she wants to go back and get her degree in counseling psychology and come back and help people. She's like, yeah, it's working.
Right. But so often it doesn't. And in those times, is it those stories that keeps you going? What keeps you going in this type of work?
Well, there's a whole story to that. I was doing an intake. This is early on. And the woman's story was just so horrific. And I began to weep. And she's looking at me like, are you okay? And I'm going, I'm so sorry. I'm just so sorry that all this happened to you. It shouldn't happen to anybody. I'm so sorry that it happened to you. And she's like, can't quite wrap her head around me caring that much. And finally she says, you're the first person that ever cared enough to weep for my story. Okay? And then that night she texts me and she says, I hope someday to be healthy enough to weep for someone else's story like you wept for mine. Cool, huh? So then the next morning I'm reading a book called Renting Lacey. It's put out by Shared Hope International that works with underage minors. And I look at my watch, I've got time for another chapter, so I'm reading, third chapter maybe. And it was a strategic error because the gaskets on my eyes quit. And I just have tears streaming down my face. I'm at my house and I thought, well, I'll go to my office. I have an hour and a half, 2 hours before my first client. I'll just go and hang out with God. So all the way down 95, I quit wearing mascara because it was just everywhere. And so I get to my office and I'm on my little love seat and I get my blankie and my pillow and I turn on some music from International House of Prayer, and it's a guy named Matt Gilman singing Psalm 84, which I didn't know the psalm, but he's singing it. It's about pilgrimage, going through a hard place, and then he talks about streams in the desert, and he talks about the valley of Baca. And I happen to remember that one of the interpretations for the term Baca is the valley of weeping. And all of a sudden my tears stopped like that, because I went, oh my goodness, right, God. I have the Spirit of God in me, on me. I have anointing, I have authority, I have skill to be able to flip a valley of weeping, of desperation, brokenness, pain, confusion. You have me here to be able to flip that to where there's streams in the desert. What's the limiting factor in a desert? Water, right? And so I can take this place of absolute desperation, and because of the Spirit in me, because of the call in my life, create life, create streams in the desert where there are resources to be able to live life, to live it well, to fulfill destiny, to walk in their calling. And that changed it for me. That, I think I was probably on the edge of, vicarious trauma or burnout. But that just flipped it for me, because I know that I am doing exactly what God wants me to do. I know that He's given me and is giving me in the process, the wisdom that I need, the resources that I need, even if it's just Holy Spirit talking to me, ask this question, even if it's just in the moment kind of a thing. And so that's why I keep going, because I know this is what even my early childhood, I suffered abandonment. My dad died. My mom went into depression. I suffered, abuse. I suffered, sexual sin. I know what shame is like. And it's like all of these things that I went through were actually preparing me, strategically preparing me for exactly what I'm doing now. God is an amazing OJT dad.
He sure is. Now, finally, my last question, Becky, is for those who are listening today and they say, I want to join this work, or I want to do something to help for this type of work flourish because it's so needed. What can they do?
You can pray. That's monster huge. We have a newsletter that goes out with specific prayer requests. You can volunteer, because that is huge. Well, it's amazing how many people go through the training and then don't actually go through the background check and everything that's required to volunteer. I'm not quite sure what I think about that. It's always surprising to me. But wow, there's nothing quite like a mature Christian woman to love a busted gal. And they don't always make it easy. Sometimes they make it really hard. But you know, yeah, God loves me and I've made it really hard for him too. You can donate, you know, there's always funding needs. Volunteer, like in kind, like we have a dirt walkway. I would love to get pavers so that it didn't just track bucket loads of sand in every time it rained. There's just a lot of really practical ways people can get involved. Our website, you can sign up on our newsletter, like those kind of opportunities are often on our newsletter. So, you know, sign up, get involved. Help us help others. It really takes a community to love people back to life.
All right, so are we gonna, do you want us to walk? So it'll be like in little, like bite-sized things to go on, like, you know, 45-second clips on Facebook or whatever.
We'll see how that works out. I'm not quite sure because
Yeah, right.
I'm not even like editing video. I haven't done that in quite a while, so I'm gonna try to play with that.
Is that what your degree is in?
Well, my degree is in journalism as a whole, so I had to do some of that in school, but
Right.
it's been a while.
I
So
know,
I've been
that's
more
right.
audio editing is what I've been doing.
That's
so.
super time consuming.
Yeah, it is. But I think it'd be great to do more and more like that.
Okay.
To just, first of all, we can put some of this great content out to larger audiences, even beyond South Florida. You know, if it's on the internet or it's on social media. It's you know, it can go anywhere.
Right.
So I think that just makes it a little bit more interesting. So we'll see how they feel